All right, this is an important story for you this morning, everybody. There is growing outrage that a possible act of jihad on U.S. soil is getting precious little attention. 19-year-old Brendan Tevlin was shot to death in West Orange, New Jersey in July. There were not too many headlines over this young man's death. Investigators ruled it a random act. People thought maybe some drugs were involved, which they absolutely were not. People thought it was a robbery as the first motive, which it absolutely was not. Authorities then charged this man, Ali Mohammed Brown, with the murder. And after his arrest, he said some very interesting things to the detectives. He said that his motive for this attack was revenge for U.S. military action in the Middle East. That was his motive. He made it clear himself. This led to a New York radio host sounding off, saying that the evidence shows that domestic terror, in his opinion, is already here. Listen.
If there was ever a reason to riot in the streets in the name of humanity, it would be for this case. But has that happened? No. And I'm not suggesting that it should. What did the friends and family of Brendan Tevlin do? They had a candlelight vigil. What I'm suggesting should happen is that this should be talked about and written about, and the American people should know. Why is Eric Holder not visiting the Tevlin family? Why is the president not going to mention Brendan Tevlin tonight? He was a young boy who was killed for being an American.
Todd joins me now on the phone. Todd Pettengill, host of The Todd Show on PLJ Radio. Todd, thank you very much. And obviously, your statement's getting a huge amount of attention and has brought even more attention to this story that we have covered here as well on America's Newsroom. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Martha, and thank you so much for, I know you've been involved in this story early on, and it just was an outrage to me that here's a man, and I even hesitate to use that word, an individual who admits after being arrested that he's on a jihad and was looking to kill an American and admitted it in his own words when he was arrested, and that doesn't become national news. I mean, I do a comedy morning music radio show. I happen to have a personal connection in that my daughter knew the Tevlin family, and that's how I first found out about it. And maybe I wouldn't have even found out if not for her, because the coverage of this story has just, up until now, and thank you for picking this up, and I know you've been an early advocate for Brendan Tevlin and the entire family, but where is the outrage? Where is the outrage for a young man, 19 years old, who was killed because he was an American? That's it. Yeah. There's no two sides to this story. You can't say, well, but, to anything about this story, because the fact is, he was killed because he was an American.
You know, there were so many questions over the summer about the motive, and initially the police said it was they believed it was a targeting killing. And you know what? Everybody who heard that, and perhaps understandably so, thought, oh, well, maybe this kid was, buying some pot from somebody and it went bad. But that was absolutely not the case. There was absolutely no drugs involved in this. There was nothing in the car. It was not about that, which the police subsequently made very clear. But now we know that it was targeted, and he was targeted precisely because of what you just said, because he was a white man alone in his car. This person, Ali Mohammed Brown, is also a suspect in 3 other targeted killings. So, I mean, when you look at the facts of this case, it looks more like an act of serial terrorism that has spanned the country at this point, does it not?
And people should know, why is there such a hesitancy to talk about things when the man admitted himself? You brought up such an important point. The family, and I only went on the radio with the permission of Brendan's mom. I called her the night before and I asked, would it be okay to discuss this because I'm outraged? And the word targeted was really, I think, an important point for them. Even people that knew the Tevlin family, even people that knew this was the kind of kid you want your kid to grow up and be, had a moment where they said, boy, I wonder if he was involved in something. And nothing, as you pointed out, could be further from the truth. This kid was murdered because he was an American, and that's where the story should begin. That's where the discussion should take place, because domestic terrorism is here. It happened. It happened in New Jersey. And a family not only has to try to go on for their 3 other kids and somehow try to put their lives back together, but they also have to worry that people might believe, because the word targeted was used, that he was involved in something that he shouldn't have been, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Now, we don't know yet. And, you know, this should also be taken in the context of the summer of Michael Brown and the protests that we saw in the street, and nothing. His family suffered as well, Michael Brown's. They lost their son as well. But the Tevlins did, too. And there should not be any less attention than was brought to this story, as you point out. But, you know, when you look at the facts in terms of, you know, some people might say, well, you know, he was outraged. He's outraged about the military action, United States military action in Iran and Iraq, and that's what motivated this guy, but there's no sign that he's connected to any terrorism. A, we don't know that yet. We don't know who he listened to. We don't know who he followed on social media. We don't know those questions yet. And it reminds me in some ways of Nidal Hasan, who acted independently, but who had been following a number of terrorists in his own way. It also reminds me of the military recruitment shooting, the drive-by shooting that happened in Little Rock, Arkansas in 2009, which was another random shooting that was motivated by Islamic Jihad, essentially. And, you know, you can't look at this Mohammed Brown and say he's a robber, he's a rapist. So what if his motivation was what he said it was, then what does that make him if not a terrorist?
And Martha, if you research this story and if you look back, this man was also arrested for what they're calling bank fraud. Now, if you look at the story, it says he was, quote unquote, raising money and filtering it to terrorist events, to terrorist organizations. That, to me, tells me a lot about this individual. And it simply said, clearly an act of domestic terrorism. This guy went on a killing spree. He fled Seattle. He avoided law enforcement officers there to come back to New Jersey, where he had roots, and then laid in wait to attack an American. That's what he did. It's plain and simple in the facts, and I hope now more people will use the hashtag Brendan Tevlin, will go to Facebook and check out the page that's been dedicated to him, which is Good Vibes and Easy Living. And I just let this be the face that brings this topic to light. Yeah. Let this young man, 19 years old, who was living a good and decent life and played bagpipes at funerals for other people who had lost their lives, let this be the face that America sees and knows that domestic terrorism is already here.
Todd Pettengill, thank you very much for being here today. We are very glad to talk to you, and we hope you continue to speak to everybody and get the word out as you can. Important story. Thank you very much, Todd.
Thank you, Martha. God bless.
You bet.
Brendan Tevlin, an incredibly important story for us to expose.